Live on Newzroom Afrika, channel 405. This is Newsfeed, the AM edition. I'm Amanda Nyati. As always, it's great starting the day with you. And as we do on most weekdays, we try to give you a sense of what's coming up insofar as the news cycle is concerned. Plenty of moving parts, but Mpora Pata, who's our assignments editor here on Newzroom Afrika, is keeping a close eye on all of them. She joins us now to give us an idea of how we're going to be handling the big stories of the day. So, Mpo, as always, great to have you with us. It's actually quite a busy news day ahead.
Yeah. It's quite busy this morning. We follow the president to KZN this morning. He's visiting Durban and Pietermaritzburg. He's in KZN for the first time since the lockdown. So he's monitoring the quarantine centers and basically how the province is managing during this COVID-19 phase and also at the beginning of level 4. So that's where Karinda Jagmohan will be this morning, following the president there. But also, the president has had a lot of backlash in terms of the regulations of setting up the command council, and a lot of people are saying there's a little bit of overreach there, especially where the command council is concerned. So what we're going to do today is going to dissect that. We're going to talk to lawyers who have taken the president to court, arguing that the command council has effectively stripped Parliament of its duties. And the committees and the function of Parliament in terms of regulating how we manage the COVID-19 pandemic and the levels and, you know, all of that. So we're really dissecting that part of this. We also look at the city of Tshwane. You and I know that there's been a back and forth between MEC Lebogang Maile here in Gauteng, as well as the Premier of Gauteng, the DA in Tshwane, about who really is managing the city. And we all remember that this was necessitated by the departure of Stevens Mokgalapa from the Metro. So we ask, really, what now? Remember last week, the High Court in Pretoria then decided that the administrator should not have been appointed there. So we want to know, where's the administrator going? Because the DA seems to be readying itself to govern again in the city. So we speak to analysts about, you know, the probability of that happening. How is that going to happen? I understand that the MEC Lebogang Maile declined to comment because he's studying that judgment. Obviously, it would mean that they would have to review the basis of getting an administrator to the city as well. So,
I mean, on the face of it, it appears that what Maile might be going through is yet another huge blow, considering the fact that this is not the first time that he's been sent back to the drawing board over this particular issue. So at least on the optics of everything that's currently taking place, it's not really the greatest moment for him yet again.
I guess that's why he needs to apply himself quite extensively on how. But one of the other biggest stories that emerged during COVID-19, I don't know if you remember the Khosa family in Alex.
Yes, of course.
Collins Khosa was killed, or at least died from injuries from alleged abuse by the SANDF and some Metro police officers. That matter is in court this morning. So South Africa will hear for the first time in court, you know, how that is going to turn out. There's a lot of interest in how Advocate Nogai Tobi and his team is going to be dealing with this case. So we go to the courts and we want to see what will happen there. So that's one of our big stories. I mean, it impacts on so many other people who have alleged that, you know, they've been abused by the SANDF, by police, you know, by Metro Police as well. So we cast our eye there as well.
Exactly, and it's essentially because we're also expecting that to really set a precedent about what SANDF personnel can and can't do. Especially once we consider the fact that there had been a lot of grey areas around their expectations when you are within your yard. I mean, I remember speaking to the SNDF on this very show, and even then it appeared that there wasn't much clarity about what can and can happen in some instances. So definitely a very close case to be watching. Well, we're going to be keeping a close eye on that case to get a sense of how it affects you and I. But if we can glance at the newspapers this morning, as expected, one of the big stories is still around, I guess, the smoky matter of the cigarette bans and everything else. That was my morning attempt of puns.
Yes,
but I'm sure it should end there. So it's going to be, I guess, a big story that continues making headlines for quite some time, especially because we know one of the organizations at the forefront of calling for the ban to be lifted has finally filed their court papers. That happened yesterday. And so this morning, of course, we're waking up to reaction to all of that and the ways through which it's likely to affect your and my life. The Sowetan, of course, reflecting on that very story, trying to sort of flesh out the arguments that the organization is making. By and large, them saying that the cigarette manufacturers say that the restriction, even in level 5, is unlawful and is not based on sound reasoning. We'll have the organization in sort of conversation with us a little bit later on the show as well. Hopefully they'll be able to sort of give life to some of the arguments that they're making and give us a sense of exactly what it is they're saying they want from the government. That organization, of course, being the Free Trade Independent Tobacco Association, FITA. In short. So that story is certainly something to look out for, and no surprises that it's a lead on the Sowetan this morning.
In the Citizen this morning, the front page is talking about SASSA payments and beneficiaries who were waiting for their payout. Gogo's waiting for their payout from Jabulani Mall yesterday, and some of them were told to come back. So there were a couple of glitches in terms of the disbursement of social grants yesterday, part of which were the technical issues that they were experiencing. So we will follow through today. We're sending a camera there just to give us an eye on whether or not the process is going smoother this morning. So that's what's in the front page of the Sowetan, but the Citizen, I beg your pardon. But what really caught my eye is the issue about South African Airways. We've spoken about its liquidation and what people are saying the best way in which to salvage jobs at South African Airways. And someone writes here that the plans of replacing it with another airline is but a pipe dream. From what I understand the article to say is that for them to get a certificate for another airline is about 18 months, 2 years. So the process of trying to do that is going to take longer than we anticipated. We watched that story with keen interest as to what will happen and whether people will agree to take the packages that have been offered to them by government.
Absolutely, and the question, I guess, becomes what happens in the interim, right? If SAA cannot live past that 18-month period and they can't be an airline ready in time, well, I guess probably Lifty Machel, I'm sure, will be the first to let us know what their plans are. The Star this morning also leading with a big story around the war over the tobacco ban. As expected, like I said, it's quite a big story, but also touching on the SASSA payments glitches that were experienced in parts of KZN and other parts of the country as well. We're hoping to speak to the Minister on the show today to give us an idea of what they've learned from that and I guess ways through which they'll do right to the many other beneficiaries that are likely to make their way back to those SASSA pay points as of this morning. Certainly, as of course Mpo has said, we've got our reporters already on the ground to give us some first-hand account really of what the experience is like there as well. But also in the Star this morning, I enjoy some of the cartoons that we get to see on the newspapers. This morning's one is really another one that perfectly encapsulates a lot of concern around the ways through which we're easing some of the regulations. So you essentially have figures of what looks like ordinary people. It could be in any country, but for argument's sake, let's say that that's ordinary South Africans taking a jog with a dog also in frame. I guess that's being a big sort of talking point over the past few weeks. And just around the corner of what appears to be a building there, we have a figure that looks like the coronavirus itself, and the speech bubble reads, "Are you ready for the second wave?" And that's just obviously a sort of a play there on words, given the fact that, the people running there are sort of coming in as a wave as they run past there. And essentially speaking to the idea that many experts have, for a very long time, warned against the premature opening of some of the country's activities, including the economy. And the World Health Organization had been quite clear about the risk of a second wave of infections as we do that. So this morning, yet again, we're waking up to a whole lot more states in the US mulling this, and Nigeria, Africa's most populous country, also taking their first steps into opening up for some activity. So is this, again, another gateway for a second wave of infections? Only time will tell, but certainly a big concern still.
In the Business Day this morning, we're looking at the story that's really making headlines about, remember yesterday we spoke about the president and whether the announcement of the ban of the cigarettes after he'd made a decision that, people will be able to get cigarettes, whether or not it was his decision, number one, or whether the Minister Nkosazana Dlamini-Zuma went over the president. Now, the presidency and the minister have been at pains to explain that that was a discussion by the National Command Council, and the minister happened to be the one that's relaying the message. What this is saying is that Ramaphosa takes charge amid all of that. So he's saying that, no, she didn't go over my head. This is what happened, is we spoke about it, and after consultation, after he'd made that decision, they then saw that it was necessary for them to relax, to go back to not having cigarettes sold. So that's one of the big stories. And we watched that one as well because it's going to the courts.
Exactly, and it's a question around power, positions, and everything else to do with that. Thank you very much for helping us make sense of these big stories. And Mpho Rapata, once again, is our assignments editor here on Newzroom Afrika.